It's pizza time! Let's make some pizza! Starting off with 150 grams of our active sourdough starter. Let's just stick that in the bowl right there. Then we're going to add 290 grams of warm filtered water. And then you're going to give that a good stir just to break up the starter to blend it into the flour much easier. Now at this point you can add 2 tablespoons of olive oil or oil which you prefer. I actually forgot to do this part. Then you're going to zero out your scale and add 500 grams of flour. Now I like to spread my flour out so that when I get to my 10 grams of salt, I can just add it on the top and mix it in lightly, combining only the salt and flour at this stage. If you want to, you can mix your salt and flour beforehand, before you mix it into the rest. And then I will give it a nice good stir and start incorporating everything together. Now this isn't a very high hydration dough, so it's going to take a little bit of elbow grease to mix it all in. This stage, when it starts to get a little bit tough getting those bottom pieces of flour in, I like to use my hands. You can use your hands from the beginning if you like, but just kind of knead in those little bottom pieces of flour. If it really feels too difficult, you can add about a tablespoon of water if you would like, just to weten it so that it can incorporate a bit easier. A tablespoon of water won't make such a big difference. And as you're going with some dough on your hand, you can scrape down the sides. It'll just cling to itself. Cleaning down the bowl just helps so that there aren't dry bits forming while your dough is rising. So after we've mixed our dough and there are no more dry bits of flour, you scrape down your hand and you'll do the sides of your bowl as well to make sure that there are no bits that are going to dry out while we are doing our bulk ferment. We're going to cover that up, let it rest for an hour, and then we will start our stretch and folds. So it has been an hour. Let's see what our dough looks like. Still very shaggy. And now we're going to do our stretch and fold. So roll up your sleeves, get a bowl of water. With your hands, is going to keep the dough from sticking to your hands. So you're going to start at the furthest end of you on the bowl, and you are going to pick up the dough with a scooping motion under your hand. Scoop it up, hold it slightly, and pull it over and tuck it over in the opposite corner. Then we're going to rotate the bowl 90 degrees, pull it up again, tuck it in. We'll rotate again, and we're going to stretch this. This is going to strengthen the gluten inside and make our dough stronger so that it will be easier to stretch it out into a pizza shape. So you're going to keep doing these stretch and folds until the dough starts to resist quite a lot, to just make sure that we have worked it enough. When it starts to resist and become more difficult to pull up, then we are going to stop and just cover it again. Now I like to turn my dough over so that the seam side is basically at the bottom. You don't have to do this, but I tend to like to do it. Don't know why. We're just going to scrape down the sides, make sure if there's any little piece of dough there that it gets all to the middle, and cover it up and let it rest for 30 minutes. Not very picky. If you more than 30 minutes, that's fine. If it's a bit less, that's okay. Depends on the time that you have to do this. So it's been half an hour, and you can see our dough is starting to get a little bit jiggly. It's started to rise quite a bit. So now we're going to do coil folds. So you're going to wet both your hands, stick your hands in underneath the dough until your fingers touch, and pull up until it starts to resist, and then just fold it back over onto itself. You can rotate your bowl 90 degrees, and then you're going to do it all over again. Just like with the previous stretch and fold, you're going to keep going until you feel the dough resisting quite a lot. If you feel the dough starting to stick to your hands, add some water to your hands, and then Bob's your uncle. No sticky dough. I usually like to do these coil folds about 4 times, just so I know I've strengthened my dough quite a bit. And sometimes I hold it up and jiggle it a little bit, just like this, so that gravity can help me out and stretch out the dough. So you can close that up and let it rest for another half an hour. We are on to our third stretch and fold, or coil folds, whichever one you prefer. You keep going with that one. I'm going to do coil folds now again. So same thing, wet your hands, stick your hands in the sides of your bowls, pull it up. You're going to feel your dough starting to feel more almost like a cloud. It's going to feel puffy and smooth and light and fluffy. And when you jiggle it, you're going to see a whole bunch of air bubbles. You can see your dough moving around quite a bit more. You'll also notice your dough gets much smoother as you work it, especially when you do the coil fold. You see how smooth that surface is. When you do the stretch and fold, it seems to stay a little bit shaggy, but with the coil folds, it is becoming more of a smooth surface at the top, and then you can see the air bubbles much nicer. So after these ones, you're going to cover it up again, put it in a nice warm spot again, and wait another half an hour. We're onto our foot stretch and fold. So with your hands, stick your hands underneath until your fingers meet, and then just gently pull up until your dough starts to resist. And then you're just going to flop it back over onto itself. Give your bowl a twist, and then we do it all again. Now, you will see your dough has risen quite a bit by this time, and that is just part of the bulk ferment. And the amount that it has risen will just depend on the temperature at which your dough is being kept. If it's a much warmer temperature, this is going to go much faster. And you see all those nice big bubbles over there? Those are what we are looking for, because those are going to give you that super nice pizza crust. So after your last stretch and fold, you're going to pop the top back on to that and just let it finish bulk fermenting until it has doubled in size from the start of your dough size. So our bulk ferment is done and we are ready to shape so that we can pop this in the fridge overnight and make some pizza with it tomorrow morning. Grab your bench scraper and just help your dough out onto your work surface. Don't add any flour to your surface. If you want, you can put a little bit of water there just so that it does not stick too much. Now with wet hands, you are just going to gently lift up your dough with flat fingers and just jiggle it out to the side. Don't poke holes in your dough. Try and keep your fingers as straight as possible. And you're just going to do this all around just to try and make your dough as big as possible. This is also a stretching method, and it's just going to also help strengthen your dough and help us to form it into a nice ball. So then you're going to take your one side and you're going to stretch it out and fold it to the middle. Take the other side, stretch and fold it over that, and then you're going to start tucking it in from the bottom. You can pull in with your fingers and just roll it up over itself, stretching it slightly as you do so. Then you're going to start tucking your dough in from the back and pulling it forward. So rotate your dough, tuck it in from the back, keeping your fingers at the bottom and just gently tucking in as you push it forward. You're going to rotate and tuck it in. It's going to create a nice smooth surface, so you rotate and tuck it in until your ball is nice and smooth. And if you notice any tears on the surface of your dough, that's your sign to stop. So then when we're done, you're going to put your dough back into its bowl, seam side down, and put it in the fridge overnight. And tomorrow we will take it out about 3 hours before we want to bake it. So it's the next day and my dough has been out for about an hour and a half just to get to room temperature before I start shaping it. So now you want to just gently ease it out of your bowl onto your work surface. You can use a little bit of flour here if you'd like. It's not a very sticky dough, so we're working very gently not to pop any of those lovely bubbles that it has made already. Now you're going to grab a knife or a bench scraper just to divide your dough in two. If you prefer a thinner pizza base, divide your dough into 4 equal pieces. So each section of dough we are going to form into a nice ball. You can wet your hands to make it easier to handle, but you're basically just going to roll your dough over, tuck it in and roll it over itself. Gently tuck with your fingers and rolling it over onto itself. And then we are just going to turn and tuck and turn and tuck it until it's a nice little tight ball. Gentle hands, and when you have done with your ball, we're just going to set it aside and just let it rest for about 30 minutes to an hour. This dough isn't very picky. See all those nice bubbles? That's going to make our pizza dough rise so beautifully. Then taking your other piece, you can do the same thing. Just gently fold it over and tuck it over itself. Roll it up. Just gently tuck the sides in, rolling it up even more onto itself. And then we get a ball and you're just going to tuck it in and turn and tuck. Turn and tuck. It's nice practice. Pizza dough is good practice to practice all these techniques because it's a very easy dough to work with. Turn and tuck. Turn and tuck. And we are going to let those rest for about half an hour to an hour. They're just going to relax a little bit and then we are going to shape our pizza dough. So after your dough is rested, you're going to flour your surface pretty good. And then you're going to grab your dough, scoop it up from the bottom and flip it over onto your flour. So the top part is down. Make sure you flour your dough quite a bit and your hands to prevent it from sticking. Now using flat hands and flat fingers, you're going to push from the middle towards the outside, pushing gently to push the air. Turn your dough and you're going to push outwards again, always from the middle out to the furthest part. You're going to turn your dough around again and you're going to push all four the sides just to start making your dough a little bit bigger. Make sure that there's enough flour under your dough so that your dough does not stick to your table or your work surface, because that could cause some tears and rips. Now you're going to continue turning and pushing out from the middle to the sides to form a nice crust until you have a nice round dough, and then you can start stretching it out towards the sides as well. Gently pull it or just put your hands flat, and as you rotate it, you pull apart, pull to the sides, and then make sure you have enough flour at the bottom so that it doesn't stick and cause any rips. Now you're going to go again with flat fingers and you're going to roll your thumbs outwards to the outside. The dough should stick slightly to your thumbs, and you're going to roll your thumbs to the outside and have it up away from the bench a little bit. So gravity is going to help you to stretch the dough even more. It should be quite elastic. So if you feel there's some thick parts, you just go over that part until it's as thick as or thin as you want it. If you like a much thinner pizza base, then you can stretch it out more. If you like a bit of a thicker pizza base, I'll suggest leaving it at about 1 centimeters thickness. So keep shaping until you have your desired size and thickness, and be careful not to pop the air bubbles, because those are going to make it rise and have nice air pockets inside and be crispy. Now after you've stretched your dough and you find a few thick pieces that you don't like, you can just pick it up and just gently pull it out like you did with the previous motion, and you can just work around your dough until you are happy with the thickness of your dough. If you do not mind nice thick puffy crusts, just skip this part. Now you get your parchment paper ready and you flour your one hand pretty good, because you're going to flip your dough over onto your hand and then get your parchment and flip it over onto your parchment paper, and then you just stretch it so that it fits your parchment paper or your pizza stone, whatever you're going to be using, and then you can just top your pizza and pop it in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes on a lower rack and bake it at 200 degrees Celsius. If you want the crust to be extra crispy, you can put the fan function on with the heat coming from the top and the bottom.